I'm watching these developments in Russia, and it's from internal coup, internal insurrection against Putin, but it seems today it really is materializing. Um, Situations, things could change rapidly at any point. Even by the time I upload this, something could happen. So, the head of Wagner, Prigozhin, has apparently taken the city of Rostov-on-Don, which is a sizable city. Millions killed, one of the worst civil wars in history. I don't think it's going to be on that sort of scale, but it's a very serious situation. I mean, this is like the day of the invasion of Ukraine last year. It's that sort of major developing story, and it's the biggest threat to Putin's rule. There's no other way to put it. It's the biggest threat to Putin's rule since he came to power at the beginning of this millennium. Um, because even if he puts this down, even if he somehow manages to regain control, it's a major embarrassment. There's a few strange things that I've been watching the commentary on the BBC, CNN. One strange thing is that they haven't shut down state networks. So, it's well within the Kremlin's power to do that. The logical thing would be don't give Prigozhin voice. So for whatever reason, whether he's got insiders who have some sort of connections to these TV networks or what, but whatever reason, they haven't shut him down so far. Maybe Putin's really weighing things up and trying some ploy to show that he's being reasonable with the Russian people. I don't know. It's a fast moving situation. Um, the last analyst on CNN said that Chechens are now surrounding Rostov-on-Don. Um, this situation is up in the air. Are they going to be pro Prigozhin, pro Putin? If it's Ramzan Kadyrov's men, they'll likely be pro Putin. But they may also be dissatisfied. This whole thing began apparently with a Russian strike on Wagner fighters that had heavy casualties. Wagner's lost a lot of its men in Ukraine. I refuse to call them soldiers. I think they're a bunch of thugs. I think it's basically a terrorist organization. But yeah, this is a very critical situation because even if Putin manages to put it down, there is no question that this is an embarrassment for him on the world stage, and it will, I think, make Beijing nervous and other Russian backers because they're looking at, you know, the regime that they've been backing and seeing it falling apart. It may not be that it's a civil war, it may be a fragmentation of the Russian state, something akin to 1989, but potentially more violent. Most of the revolutions in 1989, with the exception of Romania, were largely peaceful. In this case, perhaps a better comparison is the crisis of 1993. Again, on that occasion, Russia came to the brink of civil war. That's the famous point in which Boris Yeltsin was standing on the tank. It's kind of Yeltsin versus the old guard. Um, could Prigozhin be the new Yeltsin? I doubt it. I think Prigozhin is a thug. I think he's an unstable figure. Certainly, the West won't be looking to him as a sort of, replacement for Putin in the sense of someone they could work with. Prigozhin is, he's committed war crimes. His group has committed war crimes. It would be unfathomable to sort of think, okay, well, he replaces Putin and we can work with him. Rather, it may be that he's frankly used as a tool by the West. Now, make no mistake, there will be people out there who will be trying to read into this and somehow say it's a CIA plot or it's some sort of a just mark my words, they will be out there right now trying to regurgitate the narrative that this is somehow the fault of the West or Ukraine, which is perverse. This is entirely the making of Putin and his irredentism. No war in Ukraine, no crisis in Russia. It's that simple. Um, and this is a case where both players involved are the bad guys. One is a Russian tyrant who has unleashed a brutal war on a sovereign state, um, and whose regime regularly I believe is a destabilizing force in the world. On the other hand, you have this guy who until a year ago was largely unknown, but he's sort of come out of the shadows. He's heading one of the world's most notorious paramilitary groups. I believe they're a terrorist group, um, and he's a very dangerous character because this isn't coming from a dissident like Alexei Navalny. It's not coming from the Ukrainians. It's coming from a Russian ultranationalist. I think that I think the Prigozhin has more in common with Vladimir Zhirinovsky than Boris Yeltsin. But I'm going to wrap this up soon because it's a fast-moving situation, and I want to see the latest. But definitely, I'll be following this closely. Um, Unfortunately, it's a weekend, so tomorrow's newspaper is going to be weekend newspapers are very expensive, and my budget's limited. But this is a major story, um, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think see Putin's on TV now. Screen connection here. So Putin's calling a coup. Um, Prigozhin isn't. It seems that it's a personal thing between him and Sergei Shoigu. But whatever the case, he's made it personal because Putin has no choice but to take. So how does this play out? It could be that Putin sacrifices Shoigu as a way to prevent all-out chaos. But then Shoigu, all of these men are volatile. There's a lot of egos involved, and what one thing is for sure, the iron grip that Putin had on Russia is gone. He's now a weakened dictator. He's still in power, but he's a weakened dictator. Make no mistake about that. Because even if he puts this down, it's being broadcast around the world. It's not like I remember when there were protests in China last year, and for a very, very brief moment, there was this glimmer of, oh, could this be, the overthrow of the CCP? But I don't think that was seriously considered. In Russia, it's different because Russia's a lot weaker than China. And I think Putin's position in Russia is weaker than Xi Jinping's position in China. So, this images now of the man of the hour, Prigozhin. I mean, certainly, I would not want to see President Prigozhin any more than the President Putin because he would not end the war in Ukraine. If anything, he might escalate it even more. I mean, I think he's unhinged. Um, and it's a very dangerous situation. I mean, Putin critics might be triumphalist about this. We shouldn't be because Russia's a nuclear state. If this really gets out of hand, and hope to God it doesn't, but if it does, and some nefarious forces get their hands on Russia's warheads, I don't know. Whatever moderate forces exist in Russia remain in Russia. There's any of Putin's circle that is semi-moderate in any way, maybe someone like Dmitry Medvedev. I don't know. This is not to say any of them are moderate, but I mean comparatively speaking. For example, I don't know someone like Medvedev would be crazy enough to launch a nuclear war. He's a nationalist. He's anti-West, or Putin. But I've always thought Medvedev was slightly more stable upstairs. So it's a very tense situation, but it's interesting, volatile. But we shouldn't be triumphalists because whilst I welcome the fall of Putin in itself, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't mean an end of the suffering of the people of Ukraine because the war will continue. And the Western position, of course, is that this makes no difference to Western support for Ukraine. But it's a major news story. This could end up being the event of the year, actually. Um, so I'll be watching this very closely, and no doubt there'll be updates.